Hello everyone, in this session we'll be learning about Ionic framework. So let's get started. This is a table of index which we'll be following over the period of videos. We'll start with the introduction about the Ionic framework, then we'll follow the installation process, and then we'll learn about why and what are the features which Ionic give. That's why we are learning about the Ionic. Then we'll have a brief introduction about Ionic CLI, and we'll see how relatable it is with the Angular CLI. Then we will know about the pages in Ionic, and then we'll know about the different UI components in Ionic. And at last, we'll know about the routing and HTTP client in the Ionic app. So let's get started. So Ionic Framework is an open source UI toolkit, which means it's just for the front end part of our application, and it is used to make an applications, and you can use it to make application for applications such as desktop application or a mobile application. We will use it to to convert our Angular app which we made into a mobile application. In this way, we'll be covering a whole lot of customer, one which goes on to the web page and the other one who prefers doing things on a mobile phone. That's why I'll make an app for them. And the best part about Ionic is it uses web technologies like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, which we already know about. And it integrates all of this and make us an app for us. And it integrates with the Angular framework. That's why it's quite easy for us to understand at this situation. So let's get ahead. Installing Ionic is quite simple. We can use npm to install the Ionic CLI. So I'll open a terminal now, and there we can install the Ionic. So we have a terminal. So here we'll use npm, then install, then my dash g, which stands for global, then at the rate ionic/cli. This dash G is quite important, which means it's installing in the whole global scope, which means you can use this Angular CLI anywhere in your machine. We'll hit enter, and it I'll stop the process now because I have already installed it on my local machine. But if you'll follow this, the Ionic CLI will be installed in your local machine with no problem. So with just one line of code, you can install the Ionic. And the next thing which you need along with the Ionic, because we are making a web application and converting it into a mobile application, that's why we need an Android Studio. You can also convert your web application into an iOS application, but because it's quite easy for developing app in Android, that's why we'll start with learning Android application. So next thing which we want is we need to install the Android Studio. You can do this from our website, from Autonice website. There's a free tutorial on how to install Android Studio. In whatever OS which you are, you can install it in your Mac OS or in the Windows OS. So let's see, let's have a slight look at our installation process. So once you reach on this URL, which is mentioned on the slides, you'll come onto our Autonice page. Here is a brief introduction about how you can install the Android Studio into your local machine. You can just follow this and with no problem, you'll be able to install the Android Studio. Let's go back to our slides now. So earlier, there were used to be different developers for different type of OS. There were people who used to make app just for Apple, for iOS. These were iOS developers. And there were people who used to build applications for Android. They were Android developers. But now, because of cross-platform native web applications like Ionic, it can handle it can handle to make different type of apps. You just need to write the basic part, the HTML, CSS, and JS code, which you provide. And then the rest of the things are managed by Ionic only. That's why it's quite popular. Now you don't need two different code base for two different type of application. Now you just need one application, and then from there you can convert it into an Android application or into an iOS application or even a Windows application. So single code base is achieved, which is quite a big feature. And because it is a it's a UI framework, which means it's on the front end framework. It also provides a beautiful design in the UI components, which we'll see later to how to use them and how can we search about them. And because the Ionic also have a CLI like Angular CLI, it's quite fast to develop prototype applications in Ionic. And at the end, because Ionic is compatible with the Angular projects, and we have already studied about the Angular, so it's quite easy for us to understand Ionic right now. So why not to study in Ionic then? Now let's start learning about Ionic CLI or the Ionic command line interface. Let's go ahead. These are the command lines which we'll be using over the period of videos, and as you can see, these are quite similar to what we used using Angular CLI. I'll open a new tab now, and there we'll see how we can create a new Ionic project. So in the terminal, first you need to remember that you need to install the Ionic CLI using npm install -g for global and then @ionic/CLI. Only after that you can use the Ionic keyword to start making project in Ionic. So as I have already done that, I'll use the Ionic keyword and then to create a project we need to start it. So I'll say Ionic, then start, then the name of the project. We can say the name of the project is demo. We'll hit enter now. Then the Ionic will ask you the framework which you want to choose. As we have learned about the Angular, we'll hit enter on the Angular only. Then the Ionic wants to know which starter template do we want to use. The tab starter template is quite famous for making the mobile applications, but you can also start with the blank page and create the entire everything on your own. But it's quite easy to understand the use cases of Ionic when we are in the tabs starter template. So I'll use that only. So I'll click enter. Then it asks for do we need to integrate the capacitor, which is nothing but at the end it will be used to convert our project into an application. Either it can be Android or the iOS application. So for now, let's just say yes, and I'll say Y and then click enter. So now the Ionic will take quite a bit of time to install everything and place everything into our demo folder and create the entire project. And when the installation is done and all the files are in place, the Ionic will ask you for creating free Ionic account. Right now we don't want it, so I'll just say N for no and hit enter. The new project has been created, and if I say ls, I can see this new demo folder is in this empty directory. Let's see what is inside this demo folder. So this is the new demo folder which the Ionic made on its own. Let's go inside. There are quite a few files. Then there's a source folder. Inside this, there's an app folder. It looks almost similar to Angular project. So let's open this folder in our code studio. So to open this folder, let's first go inside this demo folder using cd, then the name of the folder, demo, and here I'll open the code studio using code, then dot. Let me zoom in a bit so that you can clearly see what's going on the screen. Here we are inside that project folder. There are a lot of files, but as we know, we need not to worry about different files in the whole app. We'll be just concerned about our HTML file, CSS file, and the JS file, or you can say the TypeScript file. So let's go inside the source folder, and here we can see there's some index.html and there are some TS files. And let's go inside our app folder. There are some tab folder, and inside this tab folder, there are some HTML file and CSS file and the TypeScript files. This looks similar to the components in Angular. Let's go back to our terminal, and now to run or to open our project, we need to run Ionic, then serve. If you just use Ionic and serve, it will open a new window, and there it will open the app, the demo app which it has made. But I don't want to use, uh, I don't want that it opens directly. That's why I'll use a new switch, which by saying -b. Now it will not open a new window, but it will start serving our application. So I'll hit enter. It takes a bit of time to compile everything, and then it will give us the URL, which will be a local host at port 8100. And then if we go to that location, we'll see our demo app, which the Ionic has made for us. So as you can see, the deployment server running is here, and we can see there's a location which is localhost 8100 port. Let's just copy this link and I'll open it in a new browser. So this is the new app which the Ionic made. There are some buttons down below. As we click them, it takes us to the new page. And at the same time, this nav bar, the text there is also changing. This looks quite a good app. Because we are making an application for the mobile phone, let's just resize our window to the size of the phone. It should be like this much. So this looks like a good app now. It's just a demo app which Ionic made. It's just a template and it looks quite good. My app is in the black color, although the original app will be in white because the OS is forcing it to do it in the dark mode. That's why it's automatically converting into the dark mode app. This will happen same if you have activated the dark mode in your phone and then install the app in your phone. So uh, originally this thing was in white background, but because of dark mode, it automatically converted it into the dark mode settings. So this is the demo app. Let's go back to our command line interface slide. There we can see the other command is Ionic generate page, and then we give the page name. And the other commands are Ionic generate component, and then we give the component name, and another one is Ionic generate service, and then we give the services name. We know that the components are the part of the web page which we want to dynamically change. This is similar to what we had in Angular, and the services are also similar to what we had in Angular, just that we changed the ng keyword to Ionic keyword. But these pages are the new thing in Ionic. We didn't had any page feature in the Angular uh, project. So let's know more about this Ionic page. So let's talk about Ionic pages. Let's go back to our Visual Studio Code. And here, if you can see, we have some folders inside our app folder, which is inside our project. We have these tab 1, tab 2, tab 3, and one tab folder. This looks like where we had components in Angular. These are the folders which had components, the first component, the second component, and there was one parent component which was hosting all the apps, all the components in just one page. Let's look at this app component.html file. We can see we have some iron router outlet. It's similar to the Angular's router outlet, which does only one job of showing the component, where now the iron router outlet will just show the page currently we want to visit. So these tabs are nothing but these are the pages. Let's see what is inside these tabs. So now we have more files as compared to what we had in components in Angular. So here you can see we have uh, the HTML file. The SCSS is nothing but a CSS file. The spec.ts file, which we know is for testing, we don't mind that. And the tab page.ts file is something new. We have this tab1 module.ts file, which we know is for the TS code. And there is one more tab1 routing.module.ts. These two files are the new files, the page.ts file and the routing module.ts file. So earlier we used to write code in Angular in the module.ts file of that component, the component.ts file. Now, because this is a page, we'll write the logic, the code and the TypeScript in this page.ts file. This is the class in which we'll write our code. These are the properties. This is the place where we will define all the properties which we want and all the methods which we want for this particular tab, or you can say for this particular page. So page is something like one section of the app which you see. Like for example, when you go to some new app, we can say WhatsApp. So first thing which the WhatsApp shows is for you to log in, it might ask for your phone number, and then the first screen which we see is asking for that phone number. So that screen is the first page. And when you log in and you give the OTP, and the second screen might be that OTP page. And similarly, when you log in more, there are several screens, and like the content which is being displayed at that time uh, is only defined within that screen, and you can go forward and backward. So this is something like one page. So these tabs are nothing but are the pages. So all the code, all the logic which we want to write in the TypeScript will go inside this pages.ts file. And what is this routing file is for? So earlier we used to have routes for the components in Angular. Uh, but now we can have, you can imagine it as a sub routes. So we can have different, even the components or different pages inside a particular page. So we can have a sub routing. That's why we have this routing inside that particular page. We'll know more about routing later part of the video. So these are the pages. Similarly, we have tab 2 page and the tab 3 page, and this tabs is also the page. Let's look into this. Let's open this page HTML file. We can see this is the place where the icons were being displayed. So let's go back to our app. As we can see, we have these icons: triangle, circle, square. And this is the place where the triangle, ellipse, and the square are being called. So this HTML should be the primary app which is just being used, or you can say this is just the primary page which is being used to show us the content inside this. And these content are nothing but are different pages. So when we click on these buttons, they just show us the different pages. And uh, in this tabs.routing.module.ts file, we can see this. There is some logic written here for every link. We can see it saying for tabs, then you can go some further URL at tab/tab1, tab2, tab3. If you look into the uh, project here, when we go on to this tab1, the URL changes here to tab1. When we go to tab2, the URL changes to tab2 here. So this is the sub routing inside a particular page is being done here. We'll know how we can perform all of this later part of the video. Right now, we just need to know what is the page and how we are actually using a page. So now let's have a brief look at different Ionic UI components. Let's go back to our code to get a bit more understanding about where we can use the UI component and a bit more knowledge about the pages. So let's go inside of a tab1 page, and inside this, let's open HTML page. And here we have an Ionic header and Ionic content. Header is something, some sort of like a head, what we have in HTML page, and content is some sort of like the body. So let's delete all of this, which is pre-written content. And so whatever which we want to display inside our app must go inside this Ionic content, the Ion content element. So let's replace this and let's just write h1, and in this let's write hello world, and let's save this and let's go back to our page or the app. We can see in the tab 1 there is just the hello world. When we go to tab 2, it changes, and when we come back to tab 1, we see this hello world printing. So we know that whatever content which we want to display must come inside this Ionic content element. Now, the next most important thing which comes is we need to know uh, we need to have that power of where the element should be, where the tech at or the where or the position where we want to place something in our app. So that comes with the knowledge of grid. Grid, which you might have studied in the CSS, it's something similar to that. So a grid provides a structure to your application. Then with the help of rows and columns, you can break down your application and place any element at a certain position where you want. So let's try to implement an ionic grid inside this one page. So uh, to make or to generate this ionic grid, first we need to use this ion grid HTML element. And inside this grid, we want different rows and different columns. So we will first make one row and then we'll divide each row into separate columns. And according to that, we can position the element inside that particular row. So let's first create an ion row. And inside this row, let's create our very first column with the help of ion column. So this is our first row, and in this, so it's something like this is our first row, and in this first row, we have our first column. Inside this first column, let's just say this is the first row. Because there is only one column, we'll copy this entire thing and we'll paste this again, and this is our second row. Let's go back to our application and we can see because we have not specified the size of the column yet, that's why it's taking the entire space. So whatever text we place is coming in the whole row. So this was the first row, this was the second row. Similarly, if we keep on adding, the text will keep going down as if there are some rows. Now let's try to understand how we can use the columns and how we can change the size of the column to actually position the things and make the grid. So it's quite simple. You just need to add this attribute called size, and then in this size, the number can vary from 1 to 12. So I'll explain you how this number works. So imagine the whole row is divided, it's pre-divided into 12 columns. So this whole row, whatever till the end, is already divided in 12 pieces. Now, if I say the size is just 6, which means this column is of size 6. I have just said that uh, all the columns were pre-divided into size of 12. The total size was the total columns were 12, and we have specified for this column the size is 6. So it will take the first 6 columns and the rest will be left unused. After that, we can again add another column of maybe the same size, and now in the whole 12 columns, the first 6 will be used by this first column, and the next 6 will be used by second column. So let's go back to our application. We can see if the entire thing was divided into 12 columns and the first column is just using the first 6, which means division should be in the middle. That's why we are seeing the first column is in the left and the second column starts from the middle because it's using the last 6. So it's starting from middle of the page. Let's delete this and let's try to make different size of columns uh, in different rows. So let's delete this and let's first create a column with a size 12. So because there are totally only 12 columns and we are giving the entire thing to that particular one column, so it will take all the columns and the whole row will be just one column. Similarly, let's delete this. We can have another row. Now the size can be 6 as we just saw. 6 will divide it into only half section. So next column can also be of size 6. We can say the next column is also of size 6 and we are printing the number 6 in middle of that. Let's copy this again. And now let's give only 4 size as equals to 4. So 4, the first column will have 4 columns or the size of 4 columns. Next will again may have the size of 4. This means total 8 columns are being used. Next, if we add 4 more, we'll be having a total of 12 columns, which is the entire row. So this 4 size will take over the whole row now. Similarly, let's also create a size of 3. With 3, we'll need one more column as 3 into 4 is 12. So let's save this and go back to our application. We can see the 12 takes the entire row, although it starts printing from left to right and the rest of the space is not being used. Even then, the next thing, 6 is being printed on the next line because 12 has taken the full row. Next, the 6 is printing in the two different uh, columns and which are actually 50 and 50% of the whole row. This is because we divided the 12 into two parts, and if there are only two parts, they are of equal size, so there will be only 50 and 50%. Then we divided the entire 12 columns into four size of 4. That's why we have column with 1/3 length. So this length is 1/3. Now the length from between this 4 to the last 4 is 1/3. And from this one of this 4 to the last edge is the 1/3 of the size of the whole row. Similarly, when we divided the entire 12 into size of 3, we got 4 equal sizes or the 4 equal columns. What if in the next row, if we give sizes differently? Let's say the first column is of size 6, but the next column is of size 3, and the rest of columns are of size 1. We can see 6, 3 is 9, then 10, then 11. We still have one, we can still give one more column. So let's give that too. Now let's see what the results are. So as we can see, as we gave the size equals to 6, the 6 took up almost the 50% of the whole row. Then the 3 was given the size 3. That's why 3 is taking 1/4 of the entire row. While the size 1 is nothing, but every column they are of the only one size, which means only one column is of length 1. So we are seeing this distance is just minimum and it's the least distance between the two columns. So this is how the grid works, and this is how we use iron row and iron column. And with the help of this iron row and column overall in the grid, we can actually position elements in whatever fashion we want So this gives us the power of positioning any element in the whole page in the way we want it to look. So this iron row and the iron column, or we can say the iron grid, are the UI components. These HTML elements are not actually elements in the standard HTML. These are the Ionic framework have generated these HTML elements, and only it can understand. So there are several more of such UI components. We can have a look at them in the documentation provided by Ionic. Let's go to the documentation now. So if we go to ionicframework.com/doc/components, here is the curated list of all the components with the available code if you want to use them directly into your app. So if you look over here, we have different components which are quite easily seen in different apps which we use in our daily life. So for example, we use the grid here. This is also a UI component. We can also use the icons here, like in the name earlier, the square, the ellipse, and the triangle were used. These are nothing but the icons. And just by giving a name, you can use them because Ionic has already installed it for you to use. Well, the most common thing which we see is a list. And this is something which we see in our phone book inside our mobile application app. So when you click onto any component, you can see how the visually the component looks. And here you must select the Angular first, then you can get the code of the displaying component. Let's start with some buttons. You can see there are different kind of buttons, one which can take the full width, one which have the circular edges, dark, and some for danger and some for warning. So let's first click on the Angular to get to the Angular code. And here, let's just select one code, and I'll copy this and I'll come back here in our HTML page right beside this iron grid. I can paste this, and when I go back to our page, I can see the same button being displayed here. When we click on this button, there's a small animation going on. So all of this feature, this UI component, which we can also make by ourselves, it's just that we need to write a lot of CSS and will waste a lot of time and effort on a very minimum thing. But instead of that, we can directly use these components, the iron components, which are the HTML elements, and we can directly use them inside our project. So it will help us to fasten the process of making app, and you can visit the site and you can choose whatever component you want, and the code will be available when you for the Angular part when you click on this Angular tab. Next, let's try the cards in the Ionic. Cards are quite famous. If you can see here, this is something similar to what you see in the Amazon while you're going to purchase something, or you can relate to the card as how you see post in Facebook. So they are just different cards, or you can imagine this as this is what you see when you go to YouTube, and each video is actually inside one card, and that card has the video thumbnail and the title and just a small description maybe about the video. So cards are quite used very frequently in the applications. So let's try to implement this card in one of our tab. If let's just try to use the standard card, and we can use the view source button here. It will take us to the code, and there we can directly copy paste this code. Let's here is the iron card, and I'll just copy it, and I'll place it inside our code. So let's try to place this in our tab 3. So I'll delete this whatever content was inside the iron content, and I'll paste the iron card one. As we know, we don't have any image of name madison.jpg. We can provide the URL of some image here as a source, or if we are not, uh, if we want to make it a hard-coded image, we can drop an image inside our project only and can refer to the source from there. We can let's try to do that only. So we first need to know where do we keep our images which we want to use in our app. So these or the image and the data or the media are kept as an assets, and inside uh, this is this asset folder is in parallel location with the app folder, and these assets have a folder called icon, and there is a one shape.svg. We can create a new folder inside this assets folder, and we can name this as images. So we can drop some image inside. Okay, sorry, I made a new file there, which it should have been a new folder. So let's go back to our assets folder and create a new folder and name it images. And inside this images, we will give we can place some image which we want to show in the cards. So I have already copied an image inside this images folder, and now we can refer to this location using this method. We are inside this tab 3 folder. We first need to go above this app folder, which means we need to jump 2 folders above. Then we need to go inside this assets folder, and inside that folder then go to images folder, and there we have this card image. So to go 2 folders above, we use double dot slash, which means go above this folder, then again use this to go above 2 folders, and now we can go to assets slash images. Inside this images, we have this card.jpg. So now I have added different images in our images folder, which is inside the assets. And now I have given the link in the source. And now let's see what's going on in our app. So let's go to our tab 3. And here we can see we have created that card successfully. So this is how we just took a UI component and uh, used it inside our app. Let's try to use the images, another images which are inside the images folder, and make a image view in our tab 2. So let's go to our tab 2 page, and let's open our HTML. I will delete everything which is inside this Ionic content, and Then here, let's first create a grid using iron grid. And then inside this, let's create our first row, iron row. And inside this, let's create our ionic column. Now let's use the ng-for directive to actually get all the images which are inside our asset folder. So we'll actually be using ng-for in our iron column. So to use ng-for, we need star, then write ng-for, and this is equals to, here we give JavaScript which says let, we can say image for the image variable of, then here we need to give a property, a list, maybe a list which contains all the name of the images. So image list, and then here we can use this image variable inside a image tag source, and here we can again go back to our asset folder using two dots, then a slash, then assets inside the image folder, then slash. Now we'll be using interpolation, and here we can give this img variable which will be nothing but the name of the image. Now let's create this image list inside the tab2 page.ts file. Let's create this image list. This is equals to an empty array right now. But let's see what are the image names, so we can just write it here. So we have some images of cat which are named from cat1.jpg to cat5.jpg. Similarly, we have dog1 to dog5.jpg. Let's just use this cat, and we can show the images of cat in that tab. So our first image is cat1.jpg. Similarly, cat2.jpg. We'll copy paste this to create until we have 5. So the third one will be cat3.jpg, then 4, and then 5. So we save this. Now all these images, the img variable will be nothing, just the name of that file. And when we go back to our application, here we can see we have got all these images in the column. Because we have not specified the column size, they all are aligned in one row. If we say the column size is 12, so each image will take the entire row, and our all the images will come in the next row. So now if we see, we have all the images of the cat, they are all in a new row. Although we have given only one row, but because each column is of size 12, so it occupies the whole row, and the next image goes into a new column. What if we change this size to 6 now? If we see again, so because every column is size 6, so it takes half the row. That's why we have two images in one row. So this is how you can fetch images from the asset folder, and you can use the ng-for directive to actually display the content. Or you can just directly use some URL here instead of saving it in the project only, and can show the images like this. So you can just go through the documentation of the components which are available in the Ionic, and you can choose any one, whichever is suitable for the app which you are making. There are different components, you just need to look at the documentation. Now let's go back to our slide. So we learned about the Ionic UI components, and there we got to know that these components allow you to make quickly the beautiful UI components. Ionic comes with the stock with several components, including cards, lists, and tabs, which we used. And all of this is available on the ionicframework.com/stock/components. That is basically the documentation of all the UI components, and you can just go there and pick up any component you want and use it inside your app.